Cumbria Clothing Collective CIC all about, apart from reducing Cumbria's clothing waste one item at a time? I was watching Simon Reeve back in 2023. He was going down South America and he got to the Atacama Desert and he found a pile of clothing in the Atacama Desert that he could see from space. And that's the picture on the right-hand side here. My original degree was environmental science, and I've come back into the environmental field probably in the last 5 years. And I just thought, this is nuts. We've got to do something about it. So I started talking to people, finding out more and more information. And very luckily, I found other people who had a similar feel to me and view to me. So consequently, we set up the CIC, and we have a number of objectives that I'll be going through with you. But the concept that you can see clothing from space is just nuts. And I'm going to just jump through to that one. So why do we need to reduce clothing? The picture on the left-hand side is the Atacama Desert. The picture on the bottom left is clothing landfills. And the one here, which is really relevant, is Ghana, allegedly Ghana. Most people have said it is Ghana. I haven't got the evidence of the picture specifically, but we do know that there is a lot of waste. Greenpeace have just done a big article on the amount of waste that is sitting in Ghana. Ghana is one of the biggest markets, clothing markets in Africa. The trouble is the quality of the clothing that they are now buying and selling into that clothing market is so poor that a lot of it is actually ending up in landfill and is flooding into the rivers. So there is a bigger issue. And I know we in Cumbria, unfortunately, send some of our stuff down there. But just some other stats which are nuts. The one at the top, here, there's enough clothes in the world today to clothe the next 6 generations. That's another 150 years of clothing that's out there. That's already in existence here. And on average, they're producing 20 billion items of clothing a year. And we've only got 8 billion people on the planet. And I'm sure not everybody on this call or around the world buys that many items. So you then find that people are burning it. You may have heard of the Burberry burning 250 million items of stock 3 years ago, because they didn't want it flooding into the market and reducing their branding, which is another issue that's coming through. But the most recent figure I got, and this is from the Salvation Army, they collected 19 tons of clothing at the start of the London Marathon. That was because the people have to wait 2 hours. They want to keep their sweatshirts on, they want to keep their joggers on, and they shed them. And Salvation Army collected 19 tons of waste clothing. And I just think that is just lunacy. It's obviously not Cumbria, but it is just shows some of the issues that are going on around the country and the world at the moment. So, Barbara, you'll see a couple of these slides that have come from your presentation, which came from my presentation. But at the moment, I work very closely with Barbara and the waste team. And Cumbria itself, the 2 councils produce 350 tons of textile waste per year. But that excludes all the clothing that goes into charity shops, clothes swaps, collection, jumble sales, and everything else. So, the volume is significantly higher than that number shows you at the present moment. But even that number, and even with those other aspects, it would probably not be viable for Cumbria itself to build its own processing centre. So I'll come back to that a bit later on as to what we may be doing longer term. And this is a recent article that came from WRAP, which is the Waste and Resources Action Programme, that out of the back of the charity shops, we all think, oh, yuppie, I'll go and put my clothes in the charity shops. But the trouble is they're having problems dealing with that volume as well. And especially the knock-on and what they do with their clothes and where it goes. And it's a really big issue that is starting to be taken seriously around the country. And I'd like to say that we're one of the first places in the country actually trying to deal with this. So we are leading in some of the aspects that we're working on at the moment. So what can we do? Well, on average, and this is mainly ladies, not men, so I apologize for this, or women rather than men, but we have 118 items of clothing in our wardrobes, of which we probably wear about 28% of them. you'll probably all recognize. You can go into your wardrobe and think, oh, I haven't seen that for a while. And, you know, you may have a few items there that you've never worn. Quite a few items sitting, we find at clothes swaps turn up that have still got the labels on. There may be items that you think, oh, that never went with anything, or I didn't like it when it went put on. So one of the things that we are suggesting very strongly, and this is why we have our lady called Carol Greenland working with us, is looking at your wardrobe, editing your wardrobe, choosing the best styles and colors for yourself, and shopping mindfully. And I'll come back to shopping mindfully a bit later. But once you've actually looked at your clothes and you decided what you want to keep, there's also a big issue about caring for clothes. Now, I'm going to suggest that there is a generation of possibly 35 to 55-year-olds who grew up in the big Thatcher days and 80s and 90s and bought a lot of clothes and didn't worry about clothes, but also were probably not taught to sew and mend. They didn't feel that that was a market that they wanted to be down. And we stopped teaching kids in school how to, you know, how to sew and how to look after your clothes. So if you can look after your clothes and repair your clothes and maybe even purchase clothing that's got a little bit more value to it, so you're going to value it a bit more, there is a whole marketplace there of caring for clothes. This includes patching. So this is anybody who knows Karen and the team down at the repair cafes in South Lakeland will know that they love their repairing down there. We do a lot of repairing up in Penrith Repair Cafe as well. There's lots of sewing shops. I helped set up a workshop that works at the Restore Cafe in Carlisle, where they're teaching people how to sew again, and they take the sewing machines in and show people how they can remodel some of the clothes that they're getting from the Restore. But you'll hopefully will have all heard about the plastic microfibers that come off in our washes. And one of the big things, I have a son, and he they love washing their clothes every 5 minutes, you know, and, you know, they want how many T-shirts they wear in a day and, oh, just go in the wash basket. You don't actually need to wash the T-shirt every 5 seconds, and you don't need to, you know, there's a whole load of stats about how often you should be washing your jumpers and how often you should be washing your jeans. We're not suggesting pants and underwear, but, you know, there are a lot of things that people don't consider about caring for their clothes. We actually have potentially a new supporter up here. Anybody who knows Penrith may know the Coach House Laundry. They actually do eco dry cleaning. So they're using ethical products for their dry cleaning. So again, it's not coming back with all the horrible chemicals that the a lot of us have got used to or used to use when you used to dry clean clothes. And you don't actually need to wash dry clean a lot of the clothes, that even though it's got dry cleaning labels on it, if you take it carefully, quite often you don't have to dry clean them. So what we are doing, we're setting up a repair directory, or hoping to set up a repair directory in association with the circular economy team in Westmoreland and Furness, and also with Barbara as well. And this will list all of the different alteration companies around Cumbria. Although when I speak to them, they say, well, we don't actually need any extra work. What we actually need is probably a few more businesses, because they're being inundated with doing repairs and alterations already. But also we are promoting the repair cafes and also sewing workshops. One of my colleagues suggested that we shouldn't be teaching people how to sew, and I disagreed with that one, in the fact that if you teach people how to sew, they then realize how complicated sewing is and how much work it takes to actually make a garment. And therefore, if you're buying a jacket for £5, you know, brand new in some of the shops that we hear about, how can anybody have produced that jacket for £5? It's just not viable. So, you know, the concept of sewing and sewing supplies is a key part of what we're trying to promote to people. And hopefully by September, we'll have a repair directory on our website. And it will be being promoted with the Westmoreland and Furness and council teams. So that'd be really nice. So when you look through your wardrobe, do I have something that would, you know, I want, what do you need it for? Why are you looking through your wardrobe? What are you wearing? And there are lots of locations out there that you can actually think about rather than just purchasing brand new again. Obviously, charity shops are having a huge growth. I think it's 10% growth on vintage clothing in the last year. And if you speak to a lot of young people under the age of 30, they are very keen on charity shopping and vintage clothing. Another interesting area is the rental companies. We always used to think, and it's not Moss Bros anymore. I was told it was Moss. You know, you'd ever, if you went to a wedding and stuff, you'd only ever want to rent the outfit. But there are loads of rental companies around the country now that are renting clothes for for work. So you can rent your next week's work clothes if you're going to a conference or something, and then you can just send it back again. Certainly in London, that's a big area that's growing at the present moment. Buying from friends, clothing swaps, and redesigning. So there are lots of places that you could think about using before buying. There was an interesting comment I got back from one of the presentations I was doing, and they were suggesting, well, I can't go and rent a dress in this town because somebody else in that town may have already rented it, and we may be at the same event, and they may say, you know, oh, I can't wear that. How often do you really consider that people are looking at what you're wearing and where it might have come from? They probably look at you and say, you look lovely, but they may not look at you and say, oh, you had that dress on and she had that dress on last week. So maybe we need to occasionally think that not being so conscious of clothing, but more conscious about how good we are and how good we feel in it, rather than, you know, people probably wouldn't even recognize a dress because you wear it differently. So it's just something to think about. One of the other really good things is that we have a company up in, actually about 3 or 4 of the companies now are now renting out prom dresses. So they're now asking again for people finishing your prom. Can you give us your prom dress? Because you probably won't wear it again. It might be a bit short. You know, they might think about it by about September time. But they rent out prom dresses, and they also rent out interview clothes. It's a company called We Should Go to the Ball. And Barbara, you may want to remind me the one of the interview one. You're on mute.
Well suited is
well
the
suited.
one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But they will actually provide clothing to people who want to go to an interview and also help you out with interviews, which is lovely. They're based in Carlisle. But I know Hospice at Home and St Mary's Hospice down in the South Lake district, they were all doing prom clothes this year because proms are so expensive and unfortunately excluding a lot of people who would love to go to a prom, but they just can't afford it. So, you know, there's a whole sociological aspect to this as well. So if you do want to go and buy something new, absolutely no problem. I've bought some new clothes recently. But it's just a few things to think about. And certainly this is the guidance coming from my styling lady. So do you really need it? Just a thought. Will you wear it up to 30 times? You know, how many items of clothing will we wear up to 30 times? Can I wear it for 3 seasons? You know, I bought a wedding dress. I bought a dress to go to a wedding a couple of years ago, and I thought normally I would only ever buy a dress for 1 item. And I wore it to Chelsea Flower Show. I wore it to a couple of other flower shows. I've worn it loads and loads of times. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to buy something for one specific activity. If you're going to do it just for one specific activity, rent it. But if you can wear it for more items, think about wearing it for more items. And one of the other things that Carol suggests very strongly is if you buy an item, can you wear it with 3 other things in your wardrobe to make it more usable? So even if you're buying it from a charity shop or anything like that, or a clothes swap, just have a think about where else that item is going to be used, and can you wear it more than once or up to 30 times. Now, we're looking at also ethical guidelines as to where there's some horrendous stories. If anybody came to the film that we showed recently about fast fashion, there are some awful stories about the organic dyes, the chemicals that they've been using in making some of the products. And there is a very good company, and I don't know if it's the next one, called Good On You, which is just there at the top there. They do an ethical analysis of companies, both based on their environmental impact, their sustainability, and also how they treat their staff and how they treat, you know, are they using children in the manufacturing process, which a lot of companies still do. And you may have heard of Temu, Shein. This is the analysis from Good On You. They would certainly not recommend it and would avoid it at all costs. It comes from China. For some reason, I think it's still thinking about being listed on the it was going to be listed on the British Stock Exchange, but they said, no, we're not going to accept you, which was really positive. And it's now possibly going to be listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange instead, because they'll have a more of an influence from the Chinese manufacturing point of view. But the knowledge and the products that they produce is mostly plastic, and it's awful. It comes from oil and polyester products. And it is really a company that we strongly recommend that you don't deal with. Unfortunately, I've just done a presentation to the Appleby Grammar School and also to the Youth Climate Summit. And when we mention Shein, that is the place that all the kids buy. And these kids I'm talking about are probably the 11 to 18-year-olds. And that's mainly because they're being influenced a lot by the influencers on social media. They can just click and it'll be sent through. It is also incredibly cheap. And this is where it really comes back to what is the value of your clothing and what's the quality of your clothing. And in fact, some of the kids from the Climate Summit were saying that they've bought some clothing on Shein and they washed it once and it fell apart. So, it doesn't have any proper quality to it. But the real issue is that then that gets sent to either put in the rubbish, sent to landfill, or it gets given to the poor charity shops and they're having to deal with it as well. So, this is an ongoing piling of issues coming through across all of the different types of clothing that we're buying. I'm just going to go back a few here. So we are also thinking about ethical material choices. What I tend to do now is when I go and buy something, I look at the label. So I do look at the label as to what it's made out of. If you've got combined products like polycotton and things, those are very, very difficult for the companies to separate at the present moment. There is a new company being set up in France called Cirque, who are just in the process of trying to separate out the cotton and the polyester. But if you can get the products that are made of recycled cotton or higher percentages of cotton and linen, it's very, that is ultimately what we want to get to, but it's going to take a long time to get there. And the products, they don't fit as well necessarily. If you want a decent pair of jeans, unfortunately, those jeans are probably going to have polyester in it because it's going to make it more comfy and they'll fit better. So, but if you're going to use it 30 times and it's going to have a longevity, then maybe it's not a problem, but it's just something to think about when you're looking at clothing and buying clothing. Just have a consider about what that product is made from. One of the interesting things that a lot of the kids didn't know about is that most of the blazers that are for sale are actually produced from plastic bottles. If your son or daughter or grandchildren have a David Luke blazer, that is already being produced by plastic bottles. And they are also working with the Salvation Army to recycle any of those blazers that they can't use into a lower quality polyester, which they are now going to use in the lining of the blazers. So it's going down 3 times over. So there are some really positive things happening. But all we're just saying is just have a think. These are some really good companies. Just to give you an example, and I should actually put Arc'teryx on here because I was hearing of a podcast by them today. So Arc'teryx are actually putting in sewing repair shops floors in each of their shops. Now, these are expensive mounting products. Anybody who's got one will know. But what they're finding is that there's actually a market for the products being mended, and it's getting really positive feedback. But they're also finding that there's a new market of people coming in who are buying their second-hand Arc'teryx products, who will then enjoy them so much and then buying new products longer term. So they're seeing it as a really positive business model. Rapid Nui, who's on here, they're a fabulous cotton company. They're based down in Isle of Wight, and we're hoping, although I haven't heard from them yet, that they may take some of the cotton from Cumbria and recycle it back into t-shirts and polyesters and things, t-shirt, not polyester, into t-shirts and other products that they produce. A product on the right-hand side, the company on the right-hand side here, this is Unfolded. Now, one of the things people say about buying online is, oh, I want it tomorrow and I want it delivered tomorrow. Well, Unfolded have, again, another different business model in the fact that you order from Unfolded, they design with their followers. So they'll design all the outfits with their followers. They'll then put out the ones that they like. You then order the item and it might turn up 2 months later. So they're talking about sort of ordering the winter collection at the present moment. But they also work very closely with the factory in Pakistan. And they're also making sure that no children are going to work in that factory because they're paying for the schooling for the children as well. So they're looking at that whole life cycle of very positive areas. A lot of people will know about Patagonia. They've had a long-term environmental policy and they will mend your jackets as well. So, you know, there is a whole area and a growing area of sustainable businesses. We're not actually doing the ethical criteria ourselves for ethical companies. Good on you, have done so much work on it that there's no point us reproducing it, but we are promoting them. And actually they're an Australian company, but they are working worldwide on products and brands. So if you ever want to check out whether Nike is a good product or whether, and they do makeup as well, actually, that's why the beauty's on there. So if you want to get your kids or grandkids to check out their mascaras and stuff, you can find out whether it's a good product or not. And that was very interesting when they were working on the climate summit. Kids were really interested to see what type of products were good and were bad. So that was a positive aspect. Talked about Shane. Now, Shane have got this terrible reputation. They are awful. They are very, very poor product. It's one possibly good thing that Trump has done regarding the tariffs and the fact that their products going into America from Shein, they're now stopping anything that's coming from China, they're putting a tariff on. And they used to get around it by saying it was underneath a certain value, and they can't get away with that now. So they're going to be looking for new markets. But France have just banned them. They've banned the product, they've banned the advertising, and even more importantly, they've banned the influencers. So the influencers are not allowed to advertise Shane products in France. So we may be coming back to do some lobbying and ask people to help us lobby the UK government to actually think about this as well, because that would be a really positive step forward. Obviously, France have got a vested interest being the fashion capital of the world, and they're wanting to get rid of these products. But we realistically, we should all try and get rid of these products. I do appreciate there is a value item here. There are people who can't afford to buy decent quality clothes necessarily, and the kids are being influenced by, you know, let's have the new product tomorrow. And I don't know if any of you, and you're probably a different age group, but if any of you ever watched Love Island about 4 or 5 years ago, every single time they were being supported by a company called Boohoo and Pretty Little Things, which are equally as bad as Shein, actually. The girls and the boys were all wearing outfits for dinner one night, and they were for sale on their platforms the next day. If you don't want to influence people through marketing, that's what they were doing. So yeah, you know, that it goes through and people say, oh, I've got to have that new outfit to go on Friday night. And that's how they get them. A big area, you know, just reducing Cumbria's clothing waste one item at a time, and just realised the time, is disposing of clothing. Now, I've already mentioned the fact that a lot of us like to just go and dump our things at the charity shops, but the charity shops have issues as well, and I'll come back to that in a minute. There's some great shops like Handpicked in Penrith. There's Brampton Secondhand. There are two shops in Kendal, and there's another one in Cockermouth that I know of. So they will actually buy good quality clothing off you and resell it, and you can make some money out of it. Vinted and Vestiaire, you probably already know of online. eBay, people buy. You can donate. And actually, the Salvation Army is a good location because they actually have a fabric sorting centre. And they will actually sort the fabrics out into different materials. And I was even told somebody the other day, they love your polyester duvets because they are melting those down into the recycled plastic, though. So that volume of plastic duvets they're taking themselves. We are also supporting very strongly clothes swaps. We ran one in Penrith for the Great Big Green Week, and again sponsored by Future Proof, who helped us do that. Unfortunately, it was the wettest day I think of the year, but anyway, c'est la vie. But we did have 40 people turn up, and we did swap 150 items. So that we saw was a positive. We have been asked, luckily from that event, we had 5 people volunteer, including Barbara here, to run some other clothes swaps. And we've got some dates. So it's going to be 27th of September and the 15th of November. The 15th is back at the golf club. We're still trying to find a venue for the Penrith one on the 27th of September. We also follow very closely and work with the other girls around the county. So there's a lady called Celestina Malkovich who runs Clothes Swaps Cumbria, and she's primarily in Botcherby and in Carlisle. There's another lady who runs ones down in Kendal. School swaps are happening. There is more and more people starting to take secondhand uniforms, but we'll have to see how that goes. And just an example, one of my colleagues ran it wasn't a clothes swap, it was actually a clothes sale for golf clothes, because I play golf. And last year, they sold 100 golf items between ladies at the golf club, and they made £1,000 for the lady captains event. So, there are methods by which you can make money and for your charities out of clothes swaps. One thing that people aren't aware of is that the libraries are also doing loans. So they do loans of costumes for World Book Day. So instead of going off to buy new costumes, they're doing that. They're also doing Halloween costumes, and they're also doing Christmas jumpers. So, there are some innovative thinking going on about how you can reduce buying new products all the time. I've put our website specifically on here because we do advertise all the different clothes swaps and repair cafes on the website. Now, this is a project that hopefully Barbara will recognise some of this, trying to get it into an easy way to see it. One of the things we came up with was that the place in Cumbria that actually sorts clothing are the charity shops. And the charity shops have an issue of how to deal with the clothing that excess clothing they've got. So the current model that they've got at the top there is a person brings the clothes into a charity shop, they sort it and put it out for sale. The clothes that aren't sold are then potentially sold to resellers, and the resellers potentially sell it to the global south, 76% on average to Ghana and Turkey. They do rag. A lot of the items is 20%, and the other 4%-ish goes to waste into energy. But because that's still going to the global south, I wanted to change. So we've started a feasibility study with 2 charity shops at the moment. St Mary's down in the South Lakes, and St Mary's Hospice down in the South Lakes, and the Restore shops in Carlisle and Penrith, and it's actually going to be Carlisle. And what we're hoping that for Cumbria-based charities, so a lot of those don't have a major amount that they can get a decent value from the resellers for, is that a person brings it into the charity shop, hopefully whatever charity shop you like supporting for your particular charity. Their clothes are still sorted and put out for sale, but the clothes that are not sold are then sorted out into materials. And so hopefully wool, cotton, polyester, linen. And so this is something that we're just starting, and I'm working closely with Barbara on this project in order to hopefully take it forward. But what would be lovely, and my vision for long term, and hopefully, is that we may have a fabric processing centre for the north of England by about 2030, if we can get a business case and if it's viable. But that would be fantastic, that that your clothes aren't disappearing and it's actually going back into the circular economy. So this wool and this cotton and this polyester would actually go back into being used and reused in clothing and in everyday products. And also, last but not least, there's lots of creative projects who are fantastic at using clothing. The one on the left-hand side, for anybody who knows my family, is my dear son. He had to produce a costume for Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe, and he was given £25 and they produced this lion costume from charity shops. So, you know, creative people are brilliant at this. You've got the ragtag crowd, and I met these people, the Lake School. They have just done a project. This was at the Climate Summit last week, and they've just done a joint project using sleeping bags and tents and things with jeans into remade, and they were supported by a company in Manchester who are going to sell it for them. So, you know, there are some really innovative and creative projects going on all around the county, and it's another way of using up clothing. Two or three last slides. This one here, the world is changing. Last year was the first time that eBay and Oxfam put on the first show at London Fashion Week. New York Fashion Week also had sustainability. And what can you do? Well, we'd love you to go shopping in your wardrobe first. What I didn't say is that a lot of products, if you buy online, if you send it back online, will go to landfill. Mainly because it's not economic for the companies to actually check it out, see if it's okay, see if it's good, unless depending on the quality of product you're buying, I will say that. But a lot of them, if you buy online, will say don't even send it back anymore, and so therefore you just put it into landfill yourself or put it into a charity shop. If you want a new item of clothing, look at other locations before buying new. By the way, Rachel Reeve isn't going to like me do this because it's from the growth point of view. It's not going to help the growth of the retail industry. But anyway, you know, we're just saying looking at other ways that you can actually buy. And we do say consider Salvation Army. If you've got stuff and you just want to put it into a bin, the Salvation Army bins are very good because they do recycle and they have that fabric recycling centre.
Whirlwind, but my goodness, so much useful information in there, Gail. Really, you know, from those horrendous stats at the beginning to all those top tips as to what we can do on a day-to-day basis and what we can advocate with our friends, neighbours, you know, people around us to do as well.